So the next part is to introduce you guys to the layout of Codeigniter right here. The primary folders that you're going to be working with are located within the application directory right here. For the most part, you will not be using the systems directory. The only other directory that we're going to be using most of the time is called assets, and that's where you would put all of your CSS files, images, etc., etc. So normally, right off the bat, I like to go ahead and create a few different directories within the assets folder. One is image, CSS files, and JavaScript. So any additional folders can be created, to suit your needs afterwards. All right, so let's go ahead and go through these files real quick, these folders. Configuration is something you're going to be using a lot. Let's go ahead and open up autoload. Within the autoload PHP file, there are some arrays that need to be modified down here so that certain things can be autoloaded, which we'll go through later on. But as you can see, there are really not that many. This just helps so that you don't have to load each package or library or helper each time that you need it if you're using it a lot. Opening up the configuration file, we're going to be updating this base URL. We're going to be getting rid of index.php soon. And what is this index.php? Well, most of the time that you type anything in, it actually goes through index.php. And actually, it goes through index.php and then the welcome controller. This looks pretty messy, and we want to get rid of this, but as you can see right now, but if we do that right now, it'll come to a not found error page. So what we need to do is we need to add a .htaccess file later and remove this on index.php, but we'll go through that in another tutorial. For the most part, everything in here besides that should be left alone. I mean, there are a couple of things here and there that you can tweak once you become a little bit more advanced, but for the time being, just those first two array values need to be modified. Constants, we're really not going to be doing anything in there. Database, once we actually connect a database, we'll go ahead and fill this portion out so that we have a hostname, username, password, database. Doc types, all this other stuff, we're really not going to be doing. The only other one is going to be routes. Routes currently specifies to load the welcome controller. As you can see, welcome controller is right there, and this is if somebody goes to the website without specifying anything, it'll load that welcome controller on default. So we're going to go ahead and change this in the next tutorial. Now that we understand configuration, there's the welcome controller. The welcome controller has this very basic structure. It has to be named. The class has to be named the exact same way that the file was named. So if it's welcome.php, class welcome, in order for Codeigniter to be able to find it. Each controller has an index method to load the default controller. We can add other controllers later on, but we would explicitly have to call those through the URL. The next folder that we're going to be working in is the models folder. Currently there's nothing in there, but we're going to be focusing on that. And the last folder is the views folder. This is where you're going to store all of your HTML. So as you can see, the welcome controller calls the welcome message view, and if we open that up, you can see all the HTML to create this page is located within here. We're going to be modifying all this stuff within later tutorials. So if you're uncertain of what model view controller is, I know most of the time when you look it up, it can be kind of confusing to look at stuff like this, but I'll try to explain it easily. So let's just pretend that this is not within a Codeigniter framework or any kind of model view controller framework. In this case, we would go ahead and create a page called index.php. We would put in this information in there, and then when somebody goes to this URL address, it's automatically assumed, since we haven't put anything in here, that index.php exists right here. It will just render this page and display it to the user. Once your applications start getting larger and larger, it's okay to keep that kind of structure. You can have about.php or contact.php, which in case you would type it in right here, and it would display each one of those pages. But if you're working on much larger projects, especially with teams, it's nice to separate out the way stuff works. So let's go ahead and take a look at how that stuff works in this tutorial. The first thing that Codeigniter does, based off of that routes file, is it'll contact welcome.php, because within routes.php, the default controller to contact is the welcome controller. The welcome controller, like I said, needs to be named the same way as the name of the file right here. All it does currently, since it defaults automatically to index, is it will contact the welcome message view. So the view opens up, loads that information, displays it to whomever. The way MVC works within Codeigniter, and I mean generally everywhere, the controller, all it does is just dictates the communication between your models and your views. So somebody might come to welcome, let's say on the main page we want to go ahead and display all of the users that are currently administrators, just for whatever reason. Now most likely those users are going to be stored in a database. How do you access the database? Well, it's going to be through some code, right? That code to access the database will be stored in a model. Right here you would contact the model, it would return the users, and we would store that somewhere in like a users variable, and then we would pass the users variable, usually an array, to, for example, the welcome message view, and then within the view we would go ahead and loop through each one of those array variables and display them to the screen. So like I said, the controller, all it does is just communicates with the model and sends the information from the model to the view, or if it's not communicating with the model, then it just calls the view directly to display some static page. The models, a lot of people use it for semi-different things, but any kind of code-heavy usage needs to be done in the model. So any kind of database communication, any kind of form checking, etc., needs to be done within a model. Once all that stuff is done, at that point we can pass it to the view. So generally, your methods within the controller should be pretty light. If you're making them too heavy, most likely you're doing something wrong. So I hope that was a good, quick introduction to the folder structure and the model view controller framework for Codeigniter, and we'll start moving on through the tutorials with some new and interesting stuff, showing you how to use Codeigniter.